Okay. So those of you that have had grants with us before, and of course everyone that currently has one, we really minimize the number of what we call required webinars for our grantees. We don't take it lightly, and we really reserve it when we feel like there's just some information that we need to share and have a conversation with grantees when we're at a time that of necessity. And I think everyone probably recognizes this is a time of necessity, if not around the world, but certainly in California. And what's happening is affecting our grant programs. It's affecting what's happening at the state with the budget, with CAL FIRE. And so we really wanted to just create an opportunity to share some of our thoughts, get feedback from you, be able to field questions. And that's going to be our focal point. We're going to break the webinar up into two parts. One really focused on the project side of your grant, and then break for questions there. And then the other really talking about the administrative side of the grant, the paperwork, the reporting, etc. So without further ado, you've already met two of the speakers for today. We're really pleased to have you with us and hope we'll be able to satisfy all your queries as to what's happening with our grant program. And then we're also really pleased to have with us the staff chief for Resource Protection and Improvement Division at CAL FIRE, John Melvin. I believe he's still in the acting capacity of state urban forester as well, so serving multiple roles. And he's going to be here to guide us through some information at the state level with regards to his program in urban and community forestry. So quick overview of the webinar today. I'm going to talk about the possibility of extensions. We know that's on everyone's mind. We need to revisit eligible expenses in this time of COVID. Revisit the potential for a change in the scope of work, and then some updates to reporting, a glance at payment processing, and like I said, there'll be opportunities for questions and answers. With that, I'm very pleased to have with us today John Melvin, and I'm going to turn this over to him to provide a state update on CAL FIRE's Urban and Community Forestry Program. John and the regional urban foresters that are accompanying John today, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having us. It's really good to see everybody. Thanks for all the great work you're doing out there. We really appreciate it. Just so you know, we do have a couple of the regional urban foresters on today listening in, and hopefully you all have relationships with your regional urban forester. If you don't, I'd suggest you establish one. They can be a really big help to you in your projects, whether or not we're directly administering the grants. So we can help advocate for your projects, help you with some technical aspects of projects if needed, that kind of stuff. So if you don't have a relationship with them, it would probably be a good idea to establish one. That being said, we do have many of our staff out on fires right now, helping support the fire efforts. So they may or may not be as reachable, but if you can't reach your regular day-to-day urban forester from CAL FIRE, then you can always reach out to one of the other ones or to myself. So we're more than happy to help you however we can. As far as the fiscal outlook for the state, obviously it's tough times, but things could be a lot worse, especially for CAL FIRE as far as our resource management activities, including urban forestry. We do have some funds this year. It's leftover bond funding from other bonds from previous years. We haven't decided exactly what we're going to do with that yet. It's not as much money as we've had in the past 5 years or so, but it's not chump change. So we're trying to figure out the best way to use that. And some of that will depend on if any kind of additional funds become available, which is still a slight possibility. So expect to hear more about grant offerings or what we do intend to do with those dollars in the near future. I wish I had more concrete details on that for you, but it's quickly changing times. So the good news is that we did find out we got a little bit of additional bond funds after the legislative session was over yesterday. So we'll be adding that to the pot of other bond funds we have and then looking at how to best utilize those. As far as grant extensions, we do intend to seek extensions for our 17-18 grants in particular, as they would be not expiring this March, but the following March. The ones that are expiring this March are the remainder of our 2016-17 grants. Those have already received a year extension. We will probably ask about more extension for that, but I expect that'll be a bigger challenge with the Department of Finance, since there's already been a 1-year extension. But we will be asking. So we talked a little bit about regional support, but please do utilize those regional urban foresters. We've kind of reorganized how we do business to where hopefully they will be even more available to you. So they're not going to be doing as much of the administrative work as far as invoices and things like that. We've hopefully established a way to have them available to you more for technical expertise and policy advice, advocacy for your projects, that kind of thing, helping you overcome those hurdles at the local level.
John, there was a question about how to find your regional forester. I thought it'd be good to just tell people now.
Yeah, if you go to the CAL FIRE website, fire.ca.gov, and under programs, you'll find resource management. And if you click on that, you'll find a list of programs, including urban and community forestry. And on that main urban and community forestry page at CAL FIRE, you'll see essentially a place you can click, and it'll provide a list of all of our staff. And that would be a good way to access them via email or phone. Their email and phone is listed there, but oftentimes email is best because we're quite busy day to day with various things. And Julia just posted the link right there in the comments for you. Thank you, Julia. And sometimes email is best, but if you need an immediate answer, please feel free to call them. And if you can't get a hold of anybody, call me. My cell phone number is listed there, so more than happy to answer the phone whenever I can. As Chuck said, I oversee urban forestry amongst a few other programs, and I am serving as the program manager for urban forestry right now, the state urban forester, which is my job before I became a staff chief. And so it comes naturally to me, but we are endeavoring to fill that position still. And it's just a slow process, and it's a highly specialized position. So it comes with some challenges for hiring. So, but we do expect to have something in the future, hopefully sooner rather than later. Anything I'm missing, Chuck?
No, I think that's great. And just so folks know, John will be available throughout the call to chime in on other slides, as our program is essentially a subset of theirs. So anything that I may miss, I'll be relying on John to help fill in those blanks as well.
I would just close by saying that it's difficult times, but I am still very hopeful for the future in urban and community forestry. I do think we are still well positioned and well established as a program. I think our department is committed to the program, and we're going to do everything we can to support you, funding or no funding. So hopefully funding, but we'll be doing our part to make sure that happens, but that is limited. You folks are your best advocates. So all we can do is have the best program possible, so they want to invest in it.
Thank you so much, John.
Hey, Chuck, just one point. You might want to clarify which of those pockets of grants that the urban forest management grants are in. He mentioned the two that he's trying to get extensions for. You might clarify.
Right. Yeah. Actually, I think that's our next slide. So thank you. Yeah. And I do want to reinforce what John said, is that CAL FIRE has a great team of regional urban foresters. They're actually a bit unique in the departments under the resources agency, and that they have so many people on the ground being able to provide those support and services for those that have grants throughout California. So do take advantage of them. It's a great group of people. Okay, I'm going to advance to the next slide. So talking about these particular grants, and I recognize that I invited folks from our other grant programs. We have one in the top 68. We have another one active right now under the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. Some of this information may be valuable to you. Obviously, we're available for follow-up, but really, I'm going to focus on the groups that have a grant with us right now in urban forest management. I believe these are the 1819 grants. That on our end, they expire December 31st, 2021. This gives us time to get all of our documents into CAL FIRE before they expire on their end, March 2022. So looking at this timeline, I'm actually going to start at the bottom bullet here and follow up where John left off. We are seeking one-year extensions. The easiest way to get an extension on grant programs is to have the control agency, or I should say the State Department itself, in this case CAL FIRE, make that request to the Department of Finance. The Department of Finance puts it in their budget, and it usually sails through the legislative process. Because these grants, the grant we're talking about right now, doesn't expire for another year plus, Finance didn't make that request. They typically want to see grants extended the year that that extension is required. We don't think that's the most forward thinking, but nonetheless, that's the way they operate. So the other way we can do it is seek one-year extensions through the legislature and make the case that these extensions are warranted. As everyone knows, this is a pretty tough year at the state capitol. They actually shut down on a couple of occasions due to COVID. And then when they did come back into session, it was very fast paced. And there quite honestly just wasn't a lot of opportunity to seek these kind of small pieces that we hope to be able to fit into the budget process. So while John and his team are pursuing extensions throughout the rest of this season and into early next year in hopes we see them materialize in the budget, we'll be complementing that effort by trying to seek extensions through the legislature. I mentioned this because we are hopeful that extensions will materialize. There is absolutely a question of whether or not they will materialize in time to make a significant change for this grant. Okay, so right now, as you can see, we're still operating as if this grant will expire December 31st. But if anything changes in that regard, we will let folks know immediately. So with that said, as everyone is aware, thanks to CAL FIRE and John in particular, we were able to get an extension on the tree planting deadline for this project, which as many folks know, was originally supposed to be last year. It is still Halloween, so October 31st. We recognize there needs to be some challenges there, especially with some of the things that are happening in the state. So if extensions need to go beyond that, at this point, we're going to ask that they be on a case-by-case basis. If we do need to do multiple extensions, then we would need to go back to CAL FIRE, make that request. At this point, we'd rather not do that. The focal point of the program was to get trees in the ground as early as possible so that we could optimize the opportunity and maintain those during the establishment period with the utilizing state funds to pay for personnel costs and of course the costs associated with maintenance. With that said, we will be trying for extensions, but right now that is what we're looking at in terms of the project deadlines as established, I believe mid-March when shelter in place took effect. With that, I'm going to move to the next slide. Okay, I know there's been some questions about in this pandemic age, can we cover costs in PPE? And the answer is absolutely. Here are some of the most pressing and immediate needs that I think grantees would have in the area of PPE. You'll see that we've added contactless thermometer. I don't think I've had a request for that yet, but as you see when we get into safety protocols, that's going to be a valuable instrument for grantees at tree planting events. If there's anything that I've left out here that you're utilizing or seeking to utilize as part of the new way of doing business during the pandemic, please do contact us. If it seems like it's something that's a simple oversight on our part, we'll just approve it on the spot. If it's something that seems more nuanced, we'll talk with CAL FIRE and see if we can get that on the approved list. But we did want to let folks know that these very standard PPE, just like we have administrative or room for administrative costs and supplies, et cetera. This is a new part of doing business, and as such, we want to recognize that and allow for these expenses. So any questions, of course, you'll be able to contact us. So let's spend a little bit of time on the scope of work. We recognize that there may be some challenges with plantings right now. In particular, there's concern around schools. A lot of the grantees have planting projects at schools. If schools aren't going to be reopening, our understanding and talking with numerous network members and grantees is that this is really on a case-by-case basis in terms of how willing schools are to work with grantees to gain access to plant trees and then still keep irrigation going to maintain them, or whatever process may be in place through your understanding with the school. In addition, volunteer events obviously are taking on a new face, and that may change some of the dynamics in terms of how you proceed. This is an area where we want to be as flexible as possible. We have had discussions with CAL FIRE about this, and I'd say probably the one thing that we want to make sure happens is that we're still maintaining the goal of seeking to maximize benefit to disadvantaged communities and low income communities, basically maintaining our AB 1550 project status. We did have a grant that had to downgrade its status from disadvantaged community to low income community. I did work with CAL FIRE to make that happen, and really appreciate their flexibility on that. We really want that to be the exception, not the norm. So as we talk about some of the things that will be allowable, I will ask folks to just at least maintain the status of the project as was originally envisioned with regard to what community you're serving. And so keeping projects in low income. If you want to move up from low income to disadvantage per AB 1850, that's fine, but we'd really try to keep you otherwise within that range that was originally envisioned. And John, it seems like you might have something to add there.
Yeah, just the why behind that. 80% of the projects that CAL FIRE funds with CCI money have to meet the criteria for being in disadvantaged communities. And so for California Relief's project with us to qualify, there's only so many changes that can occur for it to still meet that status. And that's critical for us to make sure we're hitting those targets. We don't want to end up on the wrong side of that. And it also fits very well with what we're trying to do anyway, trying to increase tree canopy in the places that need it the most. And so that's why it's really important to try and maintain that AB 1550 project status, even with the relief subgrants, to make sure that overarching relief project still meets that status. We've been identified as a program that can achieve a lot of benefits in disadvantaged communities, and we want to maintain that status. That's very important as far as continued investment in the program and in helping us meet our goals of increasing tree canopy in the places that need it the most, as well as just in general. That's, if you will, disadvantaged communities typically have the lowest amount of tree canopy cover, and so they are the low-hanging fruit for increasing tree canopy cover in the urban portions of our state. So it's really important that we focus on that.
Thank you, John. I absolutely agree. And it's really important to our partners. And so while this is not a discussion regarding public policy and advocacy, I will just say that our partners in the environmental justice community, their support for this program has been largely focused on the fact that it is one of the very few GDR programs that is so heavily concentrated on serving disadvantaged communities and the benefits that come with the program. So we want to maintain faith with them as well. So thank you, John. One of the areas where we do have a lot of flexibility is planting locations. I've already talked about challenges we recognize with schools. There may be challenges in other areas that are not covered here. We are completely open to talking with you about changing planting locations, whether if that's going from a school to a park. Typically, we try to shy away from residential, but CAL FIRE allows that in certain capacities. We will allow it as well. It's just a matter of working with our team and seeing what we can do to make sure that your project succeeds. So I know I've received a lot of questions about that. I've already talked to some grantees about that. Absolutely, we recognize these are challenging times. We want your project to succeed. So reach out to us if that's something that needs to be done. In addition, there is a required education component in the grants, and looking over some of the projects, a lot of them relied on indoor classroom participation from students of all ages K through 12, even outdoor gatherings. And we recognize that that's going to be really difficult. And so similarly, if you need to modify the education component of your grant, reach out to us and we will do our very best to work with you. And then finally, a lot of this is already occurring, and we just wanted to reinforce that we're absolutely open to budget change proposals at an unusual time, especially if you had a lot of staff time scheduled to manage volunteer events or project fairs, things that aren't going to be happening. We want you to be able to spend those funds. We want you to be able to maximize the value of your project to the community. We do have some caps that I will talk about in the next slide. But yeah, again, we're here for you to be able to make those adjustments as necessary.
Chuck, I did have a question that went right into this slide here, and it was specifically about paying for Zoom licensing if you're using a virtual setting to do your education program.
That's a really good question, and I think I'm going to take advantage of having John Melvin on the phone, who is giving me the thumbs up. So yes, the benefit of having the staff chief for resource management on your Zoom call is instant answers to questions that we may not be able to field. So thank you, John. Yes, that's acceptable. Really appreciate that. Something we had not considered, makes total sense. So yes, for that question. Thank you, Amelia. Okay, just some friendly reminders. This doesn't happen as much with this grant. We did have a little bit of a challenge in the previous grant, but we were able to overcome those challenges. Please don't change species selection without authorization. This is the one area within our grant program that has to go through CAL FIRE. And if you change species and we don't know about it, and then we have to report it to CAL FIRE, and they don't like the species change, or if we're not comfortable with the species change, you could be on the hook for the costs associated with planting that species and the cost of the trees and the supplies for it as well. So it just makes sense. Typically, species changes are pretty straightforward. They come to us, we recalculate your GHG benefits. Amelia is a certified arborist. She'll usually have, she'll chime in if there's a flag, and then after it's kind of passed the relief test, I'll send it over to CAL FIRE for their approval. And I'd say it's usually approved at 85% of the time, maybe even higher than that. You know, there's only a handful of species that we're really looking out for to avoid. Certainly high water use, palms, species that really shouldn't be planted in the geography in which you're located. But it is something that we do want to make sure we go through the channel, so at the end of your grant, you're not left with holding costs that were unanticipated. And John, I saw you turn your mic off. Do you want to add here?
And generally, we also won't approve species that get large at maturity for species that stay small. So if you were saying you were going to plant oaks and then you wanted to change to crepe myrtles or redbuds or something like that, that's going to be a no from us, because we're looking to maximize the benefit with state funds, and species selection goes a lot towards competitiveness in grants and also in return on investment. And so if you want to change from one large canopied species to another, now when we're talking about some of the challenges around COVID with changing sites, sometimes we might be willing to make some exceptions to that. So if you do have challenges, don't hesitate to propose them to Chuck. But we will be probably scrutinizing those quite a bit, just to make sure that we're getting the best bang for the buck, if you will. That's part of what we're charged with. So we take that pretty seriously.
Yeah, thanks, John. And yeah, we do too. I mean, quite honestly, if you were downgrading from a large tree to one of those smallers, we would notice the GHG difference pretty quick. And we have a obligation to CAL FIRE to hit a particular GHG target in our application that was approved. So we wouldn't want to jeopardize that either. we try to be as flexible as possible in terms of moving funds around. If you need to move funds from equipment to supplies to direct admin costs, a lot of flexibility there. A lot of people in their approved application come pretty close to hitting their personnel cap on this particular grant. We actually upped it from 70% to when we first started this grant a few years ago, it was 50%. In our next cycle, we want to be able to provide more personnel costs, but you do need to be mindful of those caps. So those do cap it at 70%. We do have discretion to go beyond that if necessary, but we put that in place for a reason. Education cap, that's directly from CAL FIRE, 20%. And then indirect for this grant, it's also directly from CAL FIRE, 10%. And we do monitor each quarter where each grant is in its cumulative spending versus budget. And so we'll be able to flag that for you each quarter rather than come back at the end and say, oh, by the way, you went over 10,000 in personnel. But it's something to be mindful of on your end as well. Acknowledgement, this is really important. I've been looking at final reports that they've been coming in from another grant and final reports that came in from a grant before that. And people are usually really good about putting the California Relief logo on their material or acknowledging the California Relief. And while we appreciate it, we're part of a larger team. These funds are available because the state passed AB 32 and then legislation after that, which really gives the California Air Resources Board a fair amount of control over the use of cap and trade funds and their expenditures. They put a lot of safeguards and policies in place, and they have done a good job of being able to provide some guidelines to grantees within those programs. So we absolutely need to acknowledge them. And then of course, this program wouldn't exist without CAL FIRE. So we need to acknowledge the good work of John and his team as well, their urban and community forestry program. So I put the logos here as a reminder, but as everyone knows, I sent you an acknowledgement template that also has text recognizing, in particular, CAL FIRE's urban and community forestry program, along with the funding source, in this case, the California Climate Investment Plan. That really should be going on your signage, on your education materials, flyers. It doesn't have to overwhelm the materials, but it should be noticeable and prevalent if at all possible. So really just a reminder here, and you'll see that I am stressing to do both the logos and text. And then something that you've already heard me say several times so far in the presentation is call us. Amelia and I have really become kind of a tag team partnership on this grant program and the others that we're administering. She is responsible for making sure you get paid. She handles all the invoicing that goes to CAL FIRE to ensure we're keeping our commitment to them. She's also a certified arborist, and she loves working with the network. Most of you already know me, and together we really can cover a lot of ground. We are working at home, so I have put our cell phone numbers here, but we're both pretty accessible. So reach out to us if you have any questions. I'm old school. I actually do respond better to phone than email, and I respond to phone and email much better than text. So just a heads up there for you.
Hey, Chuck, before you move to the next slide, there were two questions that kind of pertain to what you've been talking about. One, I think John just answered. John, do you want to say that out loud?
Yeah, Joe asked about relief moving to 12% indirect like CAL FIRE has as a cap. And I said that I suspect relief would ask for the 12% in the future, though I don't know for sure, but that they're stuck with the 10% on this particular grant because that was the rule at the time. And that's what's in the grant guidelines for that particular year. So all grants are in that same boat, all CAL FIRE grants. So for that particular year, they all had a cap of 10%. Then in, I think it was 2018-19, we changed to 12% as the cap. And so going forward, that's the cap.
All right, and then another question that came in earlier on the deadlines, that is, it was from Watsonville about whether the 2019 social equity grants were on that same timeline. And I just wanted you to clarify that second round of grants and where they are on this.
I'm sorry, Amelia, I'm not sure I totally understand that question.
The people that got awarded their grants at the end of 2019, They are on the same time. I just wanted you to reiterate the timeline.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Yeah, everyone is on the same timeline now. We did have multiple cycles of this grant. The first people awarded need to get their trees in the ground by December 2019. I think in the subsequent rounds, we had said, I believe it was maybe March 2020. It might have been to May 2020, but now everyone's on the same playing field. I think literally right before we all packed up and went home, I had a communication with CAL FIRE, with John in particular, asking for an extension on this program for trees in the ground. And I think he turned it around in about 90 minutes. So everyone's on the same playing field now. Trees in the ground by October 2020. Final reports due 2021. If you're really pressed, then get back to me and we'll see what we can do about trying to further extend that. So thank you for the question. And also as follow up to John and the question regarding indirect costs. Yes, John's absolutely right. We were fortunate enough to secure an award from CAL FIRE in this last round. I believe it was in June 2020, and we will be upping the indirect cost to 12%. So thank you for the question, Joe.
And there was a request to repeat the caps, the percentages.
The caps, okay, and they're on your budget forms. So you can always go back to your budget form that you prepared for the application. But for personnel, it's 70% of total direct costs. For education, it's 20% of total direct costs, and indirect, it's 10% of total direct costs. Okay, thank you. All right, we're going to spend some time on this. Everyone should have received from me yesterday a packet of material that is probably most pertinent to this slide. And I'm going to ask for Amelia and John to chime in at anything that I've left out. This is probably one of the most important slides in this presentation. So let's just get into it. We know from speaking with a couple of grantees that volunteers have shown up for events and either philosophically don't believe in the pandemic or don't want to acknowledge the fact that masks make a difference. And are not interested in following the safety protocols that have been set up by the state of California, Governor Gavin Newsom, and any additional protocols that may be in place for from local governments or regional entities. In addition, we talked about the PPE and the necessity to be able to integrate that into your work on the job. So we felt that it was really important for relief's purposes and for your safety to institute some minimum safety protocols that by all means should represent the floor of what you should be doing, not at all the ceiling. We've looked at some of the safety protocols from some of our network members that go above and beyond what we're suggesting here. I really need to thank Canopy and Amigos de los Rios for letting us borrow heavily from some of their protocols, which I modified for the purposes of this grant. We did not want to restrict your project any more than is absolutely necessary. And this is an area that we gave tremendous thought to in consultation with CAL FIRE, who I'm sure will speak on this slide at some point. But this is really important. We do take the pandemic seriously. I know all of our grantees do as well. And you're not always going to have control over who volunteers and who shows to the event. So we felt like it was really important to offer some guidelines. I believe in the safety protocols that we sent out to you. I think there's only like 3 or 4 things that we're requiring volunteers to wear masks, requiring volunteers to sign in, and staff, of course, as well. Requiring that PPE be available if folks don't bring their own work gloves, et cetera. Obviously, these are reimbursable expenses, so it shouldn't create an additional burden for the grantee. And then there's a lot of things that we encourage. And we encourage that, and probably the thing that we encourage most is the liability waiver, which John or Amelia both should be happy to chime in about. We're not requiring this because honestly, it's not something that affects our grant with CAL FIRE, and it doesn't affect our relationship with you, but it does affect your relationship with the volunteer. Our executive director, Cindy Blaine, has spent a fair amount of time on looking at other waivers, liability waivers that have been created by agencies across California, and the nonprofit sector in particular, that they're using when they're needing to gather folks either for volunteer activities or other purposes. She's modified those to be a bit more generic. We shared those with you yesterday. Really would encourage you to take a look at that list of safety protocols that we laid out for you and that I sent yesterday. And if you have any questions or later on in this conversation, we can talk more about those protocols. But it is something new that we felt fairly strong about implementing for your safety, for the safety of your volunteers, and to reinforce what has been mandated by the state of California and Governor Newsom. So I think
that folks should feel comfortable. You can tell folks that, this is a state-sponsored event. It's state funds at work, and they're subject to the governor's orders even more so than any other activity. And if folks have a problem with that, you can feel free to direct them to myself or my staff. We'll be happy to enlighten them on that it's not optional, that they take the appropriate precautions at a state-sponsored event. If they don't like it, they don't have to participate. And that's the bottom line. I mean, it's unfortunate that it comes to that, but I mean, ultimately my boss is the governor, and he said, this is what we're doing. And so that's what we're doing. And if folks have a problem, they're more than welcome to take it up with me.
Thanks, John. I really appreciate that. I think that's really good. And of course, we're happy to talk to you as well. But yeah, it does absolutely reinforce that this is coming directly from the state of California, with CAL FIRE as the designated spokesperson in this particular webinar. So you can see here that this really is required to continue work on your grant. And again, if anyone has concerns, they can reach out to myself, Amelia, to John. But this is one of the areas that we really wanted to reinforce as we move forward. So thank you. I think probably the last slide before we take a break for questions is, the revised sample volunteer sign-in sheet. We had a lot of back and forth with the staff about this. Talked with CAL FIRE, John in particular, about this. What you'll see here is that the major changes from the last volunteer template that we provided to folks a year or so ago is, of course, this acknowledgement at the very top that volunteers are signing this, acknowledging that they're adhering to the safety protocols. You don't have to use this form exactly. We absolutely want you to be able to brand it with your logo and your partner's logos. You can do the sign-in sheet wherever. That's why we would call it as a revised sample. But we want this language in here. We want folks to recognize that this is coming from the state of California. That's why I've got CAL FIRE's logo and the California Climate Investment Plan as well. And then you also see here that we took away the multi-person volunteer sign-in sheet, where I think the first one probably had room for 10 signatures. We dramatically cut that back. If folks aren't from the same household, each one should be signing the volunteer sign-in sheet. And we realize that's more paper. And if you want to bill us for a ream of paper, that's absolutely fine. But really, there's more space in the document that I sent you. I think I left room for 4 or 5 additional household members, but unless they're from the same household, just I think one of the terms that's gone around in some of the circles that we travel is through an abundance of caution. So I'll use that term, through an abundance of caution. We'd rather not see a clipboard being handed around to multiple people at a volunteer event and the same pen and piece of paper. So again, we're happy to reimburse for the extra paper that needs to be used to do these volunteer sign-in sheets. And of course, you'll see on the protocols that if you have any capacity to have folks sign in online, that's even better. And of course, that also gives you an opportunity to see who's coming to your event and allow for that in terms of planning. So I think with that, we're probably at the break point here. Let me see where we are on time. Okay, we've got
Chuck, specifically on this form, you answered a question about the, not passing around clipboards and pens, but having separate ones. But there was a question about adding an email line, and our answer to that is feel free to modify that and add that to the forms. This is just like a template for you to use as your organization needs.
Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah, of course, email is fine. Okay, so we covered a lot of material in a short period of time. We've got a bit more to cover, but I think we're doing okay time-wise. So we'll go ahead and take any other questions that have popped up on the project component of this webinar thus far, and you can direct them to myself, Amelia, or John. Anything popping up, Amelia?
No, I think we've been kind of doing the questions in real time. I hope that's okay, Chuck. And I'm hoping that someone can take that on. Maybe Chuck, when I'm speaking, if there's questions that pop up, I can have the chat box off of my screen.
I will probably defer to Marielle on that, because unless you're taking control of the PowerPoint, I'm probably going to be advancing the slides for you.
Okay.
So,
I'm not taking control. You are in control of the share. We are still going to watch your screen.
okay, so we're going to continue on. I'm going to turn this over to Amelia, and Amelia, when you're ready for the next slide, just let me know, okay?
Ready when you are.
Okay.
All right, so reporting, that's like my favorite thing. I love chatting with people about reports and asking for revised reports. So we just wanted to tell you there was a few updates that came over after our June 30th deadline. And that was that we don't need to send 2 copies anymore of your reports. You'll just need to send 1 copy, and it can be double-sided of your invoice and its receipt. So that's a new thing. We used to have a 1 single-sided copy that we forwarded to CAL FIRE. And since they are all shelter in place and they've changed some of their guidelines, they do not want our paper copies. So we're keeping them in-house. They are our financial verification of our expenses on the grant. So we still do need them, but they can be 1 copy and double-sided. And when you guys are submitting your invoices, the workbooks, the Excel spreadsheets, as well as the MDCAs, please submit them as Excel workbooks. PDFs won't work, screenshots won't work. We need them in the format that they're used to track and enter in and forward the data on. So please make sure, if you have issues with Excel, I hear your pain. I work from a Mac at home, and I have a PC at work at the office, and so I'm continually juggling between sheets and all kinds of stuff. But let us know and we'll figure it out. But don't send us a PDF of either of those items. And in fact,
Amelia?
Yes.
Just real quick, so everybody knows, all of our grantees also have to turn in these MDCA sheets in Excel, and we have to have it all in the same format like that, because we roll it all up and report it to ARB. It's extremely important for our accountability and for tracking the benefits of these projects. We are working on some sort of a solution for the future, should funding continue and so forth, where we would have an app that folks could use instead of an Excel spreadsheet. That's a slow process, because it's essentially somebody in CAL FIRE who knows how to do these kinds of things doing it as a side project. They have a day-to-day job, so we can't really push too hard for that, and we don't really have a way to reach out and get an app, just kind of contract to get an app made. But we do think that's coming, and hopefully it'll be helpful to everybody. But do stay tuned for that. When that happens, we'll provide that information widely to all of our grantees, and hopefully it'll make life easier for everybody.
Yes. And speaking of that MDCA sheet he's talking about, you should be entering your trees by quarter. There's going to be a tab in your sheet, and you're going to enter your trees in the quarter that they were planted. And then do submit the whole workbook, for both of those, so that we can, if we get off track between California Relief and your project, where it's much easier to figure out where we got off when we see the entire invoice workbook and the entire MDCA. All right. There was a question about whether we were going to switch to electronic, and at this time, we are not going to be switching to electronic. We're for audit purposes, we have to have all that stuff, and so we are switching to 1 copy. And also, however, if you do not have an invoice you're submitting and you're only submitting the progress report is on the screen here, please do only submit that electronically. Do not worry about sending in that through the mail. Just send us that, because that has no trees attached with it or any reimbursement expenses. So that's just giving us an update on your report, and that can be done electronically.
Hey, Amelia, there was also a question on the liability waiver while you were talking. Maybe Chuck unmute. It says, could we just add the COVID-19 block to the form that we have used before, approved by the city?
Yeah, I don't see a problem with that. I mean, if you want to be extra careful, you could add it and then send it to us. But yeah, this was really intended to be a sample. What we really care about is making sure that the grantees are aware of the safety protocols, however you're choosing to post them, and that they're going to adhere to them. So yeah, send us what you have in mind, and it shouldn't be a problem.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, and I know there's some disappointment with us not going thoroughly electronically, but I will tell you, you will be happy if you're audited that you have all those things in line, because I've been through, I don't know how many audits, and we're searching boxes to find a particular receipt. And when it's all nicely organized, it's really easy to hand over to an auditor. And you probably will be audited on these grants at some point. All right, so we'll go to the next slide. All right. Well, some of this I just brought up. We're doing just the one hard copy when you have an invoice. Double side is okay. And please, please use Chuck's home address. That is one of our issues. We've had some things lost. We're having mail forwarded from our office, and sometimes if it's coming like FedEx or UPS, those don't get forwarded. So please be sure to get it. And he didn't put it in here, but it is on the emails and stuff. And that, yeah, he has a nice house there, doesn't he?
And I'm going to chime in here real quick and just stress the importance of this, is that in the slide that I think is coming up next, you're going to see, we're going to talk a lot about revised timelines. If you're mailing this to our office, by the time it gets to Cindy, between the forwarding mail, and also given what's happening with the U.S. Postal Service right now, it's probably going to be at least 2 weeks, probably going to be closer to 3, and you're going to be past your deadline to be able to collect reimbursement.
Well, hopefully you'll get it by election day, Chuck.
Yeah. So that really is important, because we have had folks that have mailed it the wrong place. And as you'll see with the next slide, we need to revise some timelines because just like everyone else, we're adapting to working at home. And Amelia is gracious enough to come into the office once a week, but she needs to maximize her time in that office. So just reinforcing what she's saying about making sure you're mailing to the right place. And with that, I'll advance the next slide.
Okay. So one of the things that we have found by working at our home offices, I am in the office once a week, is that the deadlines, there's not a ton of flexibility. Actually, there's zero flexibility with the deadlines at this point. We had a really hard time getting things in on the last one. So, the electronic copy by the 10th, I mean, that should be a no-brainer. You should have your stuff set up and sent, and that's an email that's attached to it. So Chuck has that information. You can CC me on it as well if you want to make sure, it doesn't drop down the page, that's fine. But if you don't have it in on time, we're not going to forward it. We're not going to have a ton of flexibility, particularly if it comes in after the 20th. We will, we're going to move ahead without your information. And that's going to be we're going to be strong on that. We can't keep waiting until the end of the month for everyone's stuff to come in. Hard copy should be postmarked by the 10th. And if you use Chuck's address, it'll get there. It's when you send it to the office that we've had some issues with it getting to them on time. And if we don't get them by the 20th, we're not going to move forward. So that is important information to know. And that we're giving the groups one opportunity to make corrections. So if we get your information and you don't have the right timesheets or this, we'll work with you. We really want these to move forward, but we're going to go through that one time with you. Set up a call. Let's go through the whole thing. Let's do it in an hour. Go through line by line, figure it out, and get it all right. But we can't keep doing things back and forth, because then we can't compile it all in time. And I just want to stress the thing of, you know, you should work on these things before the 10th. Like, don't be working on the 10th and then sending it and putting it in the mail. Start now, you know, get your receipts ready now for the ones that you've already spent. Make, you know, digitalize it, have a hard copy ready. That's what I do for my job, you know, for our big grants, is I'm doing this on every time I have an expense that's billed to a grant, I put in a particular folder so it's ready at that time. When we do your tree planting, get the coordinates and recorded, so you're not doing that all between the 1st and the 10th of the month afterwards. It's just a really great way to keep things concise and clean and legible for us. Did I cover all that stuff, Chuck?
The only thing that I'm going to add is this last line, is that like I said, Amelia and I really can't do the back and forth that we've done in the current work situation, because we're not at the office. I'm not at the office at all. She's there once a week. So what will happen is that if after the one time, if there's still corrections that need to be made, I'm going to make them myself. And usually primarily what this results in is corrections that need to be made to reimbursement requests. And a lot of that is often personnel, which, as many of you know, is the big line item and a lot of reimbursement requests depending on the type of work that's been done. So if I still don't have a required invoice or a timesheet or something to that effect, and it's a $15,000 expense for you on that quarter, I'm gonna leave it off. And I don't want to do that. But as we're going to see on the next slide, we really need to be respectful of the process that California Relief has committed to meet the needs of CAL FIRE. And we've taken this on voluntarily. This is not something that CAL FIRE has hammered us on. This is a commitment we made when we got the grant. And I see, John, you've come on the page, so feel free to chime in.
Yeah, the overarching thing is the more accountable we can be and the more we can be on time with reporting, the better it is for the overall program, so that we can continue to offer grants like this. It's extremely important that we're accountable and that we're reporting on all the necessary criteria that are required of us, so that we don't end up on the list of programs that aren't doing a good job, because we have a pretty good reputation amongst all grant programs in the state. In fact, we get asked a lot how we accomplish things, especially how we are able to offer sub-grants. And it's been very successful, but we have to make sure that we remain accountable and that all the reporting gets done on time. None of us loves doing all this paperwork and behind the scenes work and administrative work, but it's a very important part of making sure that we have successful programs so that we can continue to get the real urban forestry work done. So I hope you can each take that kind of to heart, and it's just as important as the other work, so because it enables us to continue doing the good urban forestry work that you're all doing at the local level.
Hey,
Thanks,
Chuck. Sorry.
There's a question here from Marcos that I was going to address. Do you have something else, Mariela?
I just wanted to say, like, can you guys address concerns of like grantees having to go to their office and print these documents and then going to the post office again, being potentially exposed to COVID and mailing that out? Is there any way to other solutions for that?
It's a really good question. Thank you for asking it. What I can tell you is that with regards to printing pieces out, I know I've talked with grantees that they intentionally set time aside so that they can go into their office where no one else is then, and they can have their ducks in a row so that they bring like a flash drive, can plug it in immediately, and just print. So they're in the office, 10 minutes. I wish I did have a good answer for the post office thing. I would say you don't have to go to the post office. If you want to do stamps, I know you can get stamps electronically through USPS and set up an account. I think it's the same price. I don't think there's a fee to do that. and you can print at home. You can use used envelopes, or go buy some envelopes online, through a supply store, or a CVS, something like that. We are completely supportive of anything that you want to do to make this safer for you. And I don't care if I get an envelope that has 10 forever stamps on it. I don't need to see a postmark that says it's 198. If it's arriving on time, that's what I care about. So I totally am respectful of the fact that folks want to stay out of indoor crowded environments, and I think there are ways around that. The other thing you can do is, because I know we've done it here, is that you can go UPS, FedEx. Yes, it absolutely costs a bit more, but that's an administrative cost. You can put that on your grant, and we'll reimburse for that. And of course, that's going to guarantee, or at least it should guarantee, that it gets here in a timely manner. So I think there are some creative solutions. If anyone wants to talk more about that offline, I'm happy to address that, because it is something that we've talked about as a staff, and I'm especially sensitive to. Amelia,
I do want to say as well that late postmarked invoices was not an issue that just came up with COVID. It's something that we've struggled with from the grants in general. We just know it adds a new, there's a new whole set of obstacles, but timely, we've always had an issue with people getting their hard copies in on time. And there was a suggestion that USPS will actually pick up your mail till if you request it. So that's, someone suggested that. And then there was a question about whether you actually have to invoice every quarter, and you don't. That you would have to send us the quarterly report, but you would have put 0 in as expenses on that at that time, and then you could do it at the next one. But if you have to have the money to be able to hold you through, because you have to realize you're not going to get the reimbursement check until it's going to be 6 months. Okay. Do you see any other questions on there, Marielle, before we move on?
There's a few other questions. There's
is our mailing expenses reimbursable is on here?
yes.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, so for the first time ever, because we do find ourselves coming back to this issue, we wanted to give you an inside look at what we do on our end with regards to reporting, so that you understood where we were coming from. So I'm going to turn the slide over to Amelia.
Oh, this is just kind of a story slide, a flow chart. And I want you guys to realize, as John has been telling you, we're a grantee as well. We're compiling everything that you send us and creating one invoice that is, when we used to do hard copy, was a large box that we would drop off at CAL FIRE. So you guys are a part of a big present that we're putting together for CAL FIRE every quarter. And our time, we have so many days to do that. So basically, between Chuck, you guys are sending the stuff to Chuck, you're emailing stuff to Chuck, and he's processing those. He's reading through those, making sure that the information's there. He forwards your MDCAs to our contractor, who starts to calculate the GHGs. And if has questions, it comes back to him. He's looking at your invoices indirectly to make sure that things line up, and asking you simple questions if he needs them. And then he sends them to me, and then I start to compile all these things into one massive document that we're going to be asking in order to get reimbursed. So every time we have a snag, it's just delaying that process a little bit more. So if you don't have your, if you send us a PDF of your tree form, where you have to, that we can't get that over to our contractor. So every little thing slows down this process. And then I sit at my office. That's what I go in there for. And I create a huge invoice, and I compile all the different things together. And this is why, one reason why the hard copies are easy for us, because it's much easier to read numbers, or, because people are sending us screenshots and pictures with their cameras of their, cell phones of their receipts, and they're not always very easy to read. So the hard copies are important for us to make sure we have the proper numbers. And then we're compiling that, putting it in a package, and now we're scanning and well, not scanning, we're using your electronic versions to create a PDF that we're sending over to CAL FIRE. And we have to have that in by the end of the month. So you guys are on the 10th. We have to have that whole thing done by the, you know, if it's the 30th or the 31st of the month, it has to be postmarked, or yeah, well, right now we're not postmarking, but we're emailing it to John by the 30th. So it's 20 days for us to do all of this stuff, and we're all working remotely. And we don't have access to our work phone, our scanners. We're running around like you guys are. So just want you to see this in this picture of
that's a self-imposed deadline by Relief, because they want to make sure you guys get paid as timely as possible.
Right.
And we, you know, that they bill us on a regular basis so that the funds flow so that they can pay you on time.
Exactly.
As close to on time as our slow, crappy state process will allow.
And then you know that it takes almost 90 days to get our payment from California Relief. So I mean from CAL FIRE. So up to 90 days for us to get that check. So the longer it takes for us to submit our invoice into CAL FIRE, you got to add the 3 months onto that we don't know when we're going to get paid. So I know you guys are all waiting to get paid, and we really would love, you know, wish it was instantaneous, but it is not. And I don't know if you guys, you know, we try to explain that to you when we have issues and are trying to get everything lined up, but it's good. But we want to help you, and that's the one thing, you know, taking a time out of your day to sit down and call one of us and work through where the snags are, what things aren't working out is gonna serve you a lot better than continuing to send us documents or that don't balance or don't work out. And then we tend to, you know, if you're the person that sends in your report early or on time, and there's a when I grew up, there was an ice cream store that had a sign, and it said, "The size of your scoop depends on your attitude." I kind of feel that way with this stuff. If you're going to go through the steps of this, we're going to try to turn around and get you first, because you know, if you turned yours in on the 5th of October, and someone else turned theirs on the 30th, or there's a priority list, and if you are having financial issues, please do let us know. If you use your credit card and you're having some problems, and then, you know, please let us know. We don't want to penalize you for that, but you do know that if you get everything in on time and with no issues, there will be, you know, it is to your advantage and to California Relief's advantage.
And I'll add one more thing here that I think is important, is that the reason that Amelia and I are so diligent and kind of get into the weeds on this is that when we're submitting to CAL FIRE, we want to know that it's right. We want to know that they're not going to come back to us with questions, because we're on a different process where if we are submitting to CAL FIRE with the confidence that what we've submitted is right, then we're going to pay you when we have the money. We're not going to wait for CAL FIRE to come back and say, okay, now we're going to send your payment to the controller. If we have the funds in the bank, whether it's either from an advance payment from CAL FIRE or for other mechanisms, we're going to pay you. So I won't say it's a high risk. I would say it's actually a very low risk, but California Relief is taking a risk that what we're submitting to CAL FIRE is accurate. And I would say in the years that we've been doing this with GGRF grants, I think we've had questions back from CAL FIRE 3 times over the course of these last 5 years on the quarterly reports that we've submitted to them. So this actually is a fairly well-oiled machine, but it does start with the grantee and timely reporting.
Yeah, and I think the big lesson, I have 3 things I wrote down here, is to be timely, to be complete. So, you know, before you send it, make sure you've got all your costs involved and you have all the backup materials for them lined up. And then ask for assistance, or if you need help, get help before you submit. So, you know, call about questions on whether things will be covered, or what section of the bill they go on, or things like that. Ask us before. And I think that those are those three things. If you can check those off before you submit, then you're going to be in a good place.
Okay, I think we are pretty much close to wrapping up here. Looks like we're gonna finish on time. I think we'd set 75 minutes aside. So we have a few minutes for additional questions. Mariella, do you wanna throw some at us if there are any?
I don't see any questions yet.
Okay. Well, I think at this point, we're going to do one more slide, offer some closing thoughts, and then we'll open up the mics. And so let me just go ahead and do that. So I really wanted John and Amelia and I to offer just some closing thoughts, and then we want to open up the mics for everyone. Hey, we know it's tough times. We totally get it. In the world that Mariella and I occupy, and public policy and advocacy, you know, all the issues that have come up over the last several months have made their way into the legislative process, and these are issues that we are working on constantly in terms of, you know, how do we balance the pandemic with what's happening in terms of racial justice and economic downturn and climate change, and it's very difficult. And we recognize that, as John would attest to, and perhaps even the regional urban foresters that looked at our last application that was funded. When we were approved for our concept proposal from CAL FIRE earlier this year, that approval came after shelter in place, or it may have come right at shelter in place. And very quickly, the staff got together and said, what can we do in this grant as we put together a full proposal? How can we frame this in a way that's meeting the needs of CAL FIRE, the California Climate Investment Program, but also the immediate needs of the grantees? And we spent a lot of time in recrafting major elements of that proposal to speak to the moment that we're in, and trying to maximize benefit to those applicants that are going to be looking for scarce funds. As John said, he has some funds, we have some funds, but the future is very uncertain. We're going to continue to do our job at the state capitol to be advocates for State's urban and community forestry program, other funding sources. But as grant administrators, we also want to be cognizant of the challenges everyone's facing, and be a resource as best as possible. So we know everyone's struggling, and we first and foremost want to help. We really appreciate the partnership with CAL FIRE, and we know they're going to continue to also serve this community as best as possible. And I think with that, I'll turn it over to John and then Amelia.
Yeah, I just wanted to let you all know that I am aware of how difficult slow payments make your lives. And it's something that I constantly am working on. I don't have full control over that, or you would be getting paid very quickly. It's just part of doing business with the state. I think you'll find that even if you work with other state grant programs, that slow payment is an issue. Part of that is the multiple controls that are put in place over grant funds. Part of it is often lack of staffing in the accounting sections of state agencies. That's certainly true of CAL FIRE. It's a revolving door of accountants. They come and they go. They have to learn their job. It takes them a while, and the excuses stink. And I'm going to keep pushing to find ways to make it faster, but ultimately, sometimes the slowness isn't even within our agency. It's with the state controller's office, who cuts all the checks. Why they're not willing to set up direct deposit for grantees, I don't know. You would think in the 21st century that would be a possibility, but for whatever reason, it's not currently. All I can say is the only way those things change is if people make noise about it. And the state controller is an elected official, and you have your legislative representatives as well. And if you feel that slow payment is an issue, I would say that is on the state government and not on California Relief. They pay you as quickly as they possibly can. So hold us accountable. we do the best we can within the system we're given. So while I fully understand that it's very important that we be accountable for all these funds, I think sometimes there's a bit of overkill with how long it takes people to get paid with all the systems that have been put in place. So I just wanted to put that out there for you, that we're aware of how difficult that makes your lives. And we're doing everything we can from where we sit within state government to fix that, but there's only so much we can do about it. And I apologize to you for that.
Yeah, and I'll take it. One of my favorite jobs is writing you guys your checks. So but that comes second to doing site visits. For those of you who have been able to see me on a site visit, know it's like my favorite thing to do. And I even got some in there at the beginning of March, but with the current situation, site visits is going to be hard. So we're going to try to find some unique, interesting ways, maybe using Zoom or FaceTime or something like that, to be able to see how your projects are unfolding. But we do look at your pictures and things like that. I did want to say there were a couple of questions I wanted to. One is if they wondered if they would be receiving a copy of this presentation. I'm guessing maybe the PowerPoint. Is that what you meant, Lauren? Yeah, the PowerPoint version. And I think that's easy for us to do, right, Chuck?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're recording it, and sure, we can absolutely make the PowerPoint available. And I think at this time, since we're close on time, I'm going to stop sharing the screen. Going to go to everyone, and then if there's more questions, Mariella, you can, or Amelia, you can answer those. But if folks want to take their mics off, this is also just a moment for real quickly to offer any other feedback or comments you have. We really appreciate you joining us today. And let's start with any questions that are still in the queue. So Amelia or Mariella? Yeah,
there was one. Rosa did have a question, and I think it's a pretty easy answer, and that's about changing if she was planting at a particular school in a DAC and she was going to be switching to a different school that's also in a DAC. That is something she can just work through, check with, and there won't be an issue with that.
Absolutely. Okay.
And I think that's all I see in the queue.
Great. So everyone take their mic off. Marcos, I saw your hand. How are you in San Francisco?
Hey, we're good. It's only a code yellow pollution day today, so. Since Mr. Melvin mentioned about making some noise, I know I can be noisy sometimes, but I did want to reiterate the challenge for me personally getting in the hard copies. Not like this is a surprise for any of you with Cal Relief, but it is a huge burden for me personally with the way my organization is set up. I have to go to the East Bay. There's 5 doors in between. I have to get access from several people. And with the understanding that it's a copy for the records of Cal Relief, I would rather have a reduction of several $100s of my grant than have to go through the burden of getting the hard copy. Again, and I know that this is my personal challenge, and it might not be the challenge for everyone. And I understand also it might be easier for you all to correct my often inaccurate numbers and tease them back and forth. But I do, going off of what John said, want to make one more bit of noise about how much of a burden that is for me, especially during the pandemic. So that's my noise, and I can get the tambourine.
Marcos, is there any way that you can get UPS, because they do printing and all that jazz stuff? Is there any way you could get them UPS to print your copies and mail it out for you without having to physically go to the UPS store or anything like that? Just email them.
I guess it's either you're going to jump through the hoop of one thing or another. I guess my request is on your end, to consider waiving that requirement.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't matter if I go into the office or if I go into UPS or I go to postal, it's all going to be the same amount of exposure risk and time that I could be watering my trees.
I'll leave that to Chuck and Amelia.
Yeah, we did cover this in the slide. I'm just happy to have further conversations with Amelia and maybe bring John as necessary. If we can come up with a a creative solution, we will try.
I'm so grateful.
And just to let you guys know, California Relief is going through a full audit on our last 2 closed grants. And I think that will be a good eye opener for us of what an audit, what kind of backup we need to have in stock. And it'll also let you guys know what we'll pass that on, what you as a grantee needs to have. So Marcus, is this maybe something might want to talk to someone about what you need to have access to if you are audited.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I think I saw David's hand go up, and then I thought I saw Nicole wanting to chime in. I know we're going late, so if folks need to leave, absolutely you should, but folks that want to stick around, we'll stay on as long as there's questions to be answered or comments to discuss. So I'm going to go to David at City Trees, then Nicole at Sustainable Claremont, and then Vladimir at People for Trees, or Trees and People. Sorry, Vlad.
People and trees.
All right, David.
So first, thanks Chuck and John and Amelia. This was great, very helpful. Yesterday we did an audit of the 130 trees that we planted on this grant, and we found, I believe, 8 trees that have died. So I'm not expecting any problems, but we're going to go out and buy replacement trees and expense them. And any help there or any comments you have for us about what we should be doing to report these 8 dead trees? Any issues replacing them?
No. In fact, I think in the webinars that we do for these applications, we encourage you to set aside a small budget for replacement trees. Right. It's part of doing business. Based on what you've said, I don't think that's an unreasonable mortality rate. So, you know, whatever you're doing to make the other trees successful, go forward with that. Make sure you're replacing with comparable species, so you're still getting your GHG bang for buck, unless all the species that are dying are the same ones and they're in the same location, and then you may want to think about why that's occurring. But to be totally honest, John and Amelia have 1,000 times more experience in this than I do. So I'm going to turn it over to either of them for some advice as well.
Okay.
As far as replacement trees, one, if you did not budget for replacement trees, as some of you may not have, you can always show them as match, which helps you. You might not have to show other things as match. It's helpful to do that. Even if you end up overmatching, that makes the overall program look stronger. But then as far as what to do is to keep trees alive, it all starts with good quality nursery stock, as a lot of you well know. So making sure you get that good stock, don't settle for second best from the nursery. But then, of course, planting them correctly, which you all know how to do very well. And then as far as tree care, you know, sometimes things are outside of our control. People mess with the trees. You know, there's some unknown issue with the nursery stock you weren't aware of. So I think 8 out of 130 is not bad, and that you shouldn't be overly concerned by that. As far as the reporting on that, you'd want to identify which 8 trees those were that you're replacing, so that you make sure you're reporting that in your spreadsheet that they've been replaced. And if you're replacing with the same species, then that's fine. And if you replace it with a different species that's equivalent, you would just need to work with Chuck and Amelia on that, so they make sure they get the reporting right.
Yeah, we think 6 of the 8 were irrigation system failures and 2 were vandalism.
Right, and that's both of those are probably some of the most common reasons we see trees.
Yeah, it happens. And David, we have safeguards in place so that if the MDCA, if you didn't report the replacements correctly, Colleen will catch it, and if Colleen doesn't catch it, Julia will catch it. So we'll make sure it gets right. So thank you for the comment, David.
Thanks again for the time today.
Of course. All right, we're going to go to Nicole at Sustainable Claremont. And Nicole, since your picture's not on, I wasn't sure if you had a question.
No, I don't. I actually don't. But I will say that it was helpful to bring up the inclusion of adhering to COVID protocols on the waiver, because that was definitely not something that I had thought of before. So that little bit was helpful to me.
Great. All right. Well, thank you very much. Okay, we've got Vladimir in Santa Ana. Yes, Vlad?
people, actually it's people and trees. It's very simple. Everybody, people for trees, trees and people, whatever. People and trees equally. Now, you mentioned to submit, let's say, wanted changes in the budget, but if in our case, it's like juggling between other hope to plant with volunteers or have planting by contractor, which we did last 2 weeks ago, actually. And that may be last moment, and that comes from the same personnel line item. So it will be within the limits of, like, from instead of our hours for organizing the event with volunteers, it would be paid to the contractor, and quite similar amount in general. So what do we need still to submit it beforehand for approval?
No, no. I mean, that makes sense. If volunteer events right now are difficult to organize, and of course there's some safety considerations in place, and you feel more comfortable having a contractor do the tree plantings, and it's going to be a wash in your budget, that's fine. Like you said, it's coming from the same source.
Well, thanks. Just to kind of comment, I'm not comfortable planting not with volunteers, because that's the point, to facilitate the mass movement for planting. So I would prefer to do that. So I'll be trying to do that, but we'll see how it works. Thanks.
Sure.
Well, it sounds like you're of the right mindset on that. It's just, you know, I think everybody understands that these are not usual times, and so sometimes we have to take some unusual steps to accomplish what we're trying to accomplish. As much extra benefit as we get out of having volunteers do the planting, the community will benefit from those trees anyway, right?
Well, we do
so,
care. Well, we
right.
do care with volunteers. That's easier, small groups.
Right.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Vlad. Amelia.
I just wanted to let everyone know that we are having a webinar on September 15th, which is gonna talk specifically about how to do plantings during this time with with volunteers or without. Or it's some of this information you learned today you'll be hearing it again, but then we'll also be hearing from some of our grantees or network groups that are doing plantings during this time, and how they have adjusted and pivoted their programs to be able to continue.
Are there any final comments from attendees today? I see most everyone stayed on. Really appreciate your extra time on this. Mariella, thank you for keeping us technically aligned and moving forward. Again, many thanks to CAL FIRE for joining us today. And with no other comments or questions being seen, I think we're good to sign off. Everyone stay safe, stay healthy, and take care.